Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, Hanukkah Healing. My name is Hana, and on this channel I share with you the spiritual and esoteric mysteries of the Vedas, of yoga, of Ayurveda, and of Vedic astrology. And on this video today, I'm going to be speaking about the spiritual energetics of power, love, relationships, and devotion as we have a full moon peaking in Sidereal Libra in Vishaka Nakshatra. So if you're interested in learning more, stay tuned. Okay, so there is a lot that is happening in the sky right now, and there's a lot that's happening this month of May. If you watched my last video that I uploaded, I spoke about the major transits that are happening this month of May. And this full moon in Libra is kind of welcoming in these bigger transits because we have Jupiter moving signs this week on the 14th, transitioning from Taurus into Gemini. And then just a couple of days later, on the 18th, we have a Rahu and Ketu, the karmic nodes, moving from the Pisces and Virgo axis into the axis of Aquarius and Leo. And so these are huge karmic shifts, huge timeline shifts, and we are really in a time where we are being asked to level up spiritually. We are being asked to choose a higher and more dharmic path. And I feel that the energy of this full moon is really bringing that in. It's really underscoring this energy a little bit more, which is always what happens in the sky. It's perfectly and divinely arranged. And so what I mean by the fact that this full moon is extra special and it's really bringing in this energy of leveling up and taking things to the next octave in our lives, really aligning with our highest timeline, is because this moon is happening in the nakshatra of Vishaka. And Vishaka is sometimes referred to as the mansion or the section of the sky of power. It's the house of power, and it's the house of divine alignment. It's an energy of single pointed focus, of real and true devotion. So if we think about the energy of Vishaka and single pointed devotion, we naturally are invited to think of Radharani, because Vishaka is an expression or an extension of Radharani, who is the consort of Krishna. She is the yin to Krishna's yang, and you can't really have Radha without Krishna. You can't have Shiva without Shakti. You can't have Purusha without Prakriti. And so it's these spiritual energetics of the masculine and feminine that are really pulsing through this moment. Now, of course, Vishaka is in Libra. It's actually spanning both Libra and Scorpio, but it begins in Libra, and this full moon is happening technically in Libra, about 28 degrees of Libra. So just inching up to Scorpio, where the moon is debilitated, but not quite. And Libra is owned by Venus, Venus being the karka and signifier of love and devotion. Right now, Venus is exalted in Pisces. Venus is very, very strong in the sky and has a lot of Shakti that's emanating through the universe. The two Rashis that Venus owns are Libra as well as Taurus. And there's some really big activations because we have Jupiter, who is Guru, leaving Taurus and moving into Gemini this month. And then we also have our Purnima, our full moon, happening in Venus's other sign, which is Libra. So naturally, there could be a lot coming up in your life right now around relationships, around devotion, around luxury, around sensuality, sexuality, beauty. So as I was saying, These energies of Purusha and Prakriti, or masculine and feminine, or yang and yin, or Shiva and Shakti, these are the energies that really pervade all of creation. It's said that Purusha, the divine masculine, this conscious, choiceless, passive awareness, is so deep in consciousness, in love, that this expression of Prakriti, of divine nature, aches to relate, to have a relationship with the divine. Because if you think about spirituality in general, there's kind of like these two dueling energies of masculine and feminine. So, for example, masculine spirituality is more about deep practice, deep breath, nothingness, being in the void, being in the abyss, in the darkness. Kind of like Zen meditation is always the form of meditation that I relate to masculine practice. And then feminine practice is more about movement. It's about expressing emotions, be it through dance, be it through art, be it by making love. And so these are very Venusian expressions. And both of these energies exist in our world. And this full moon is peaking in the more Venusian and more feminine sign of both Libra and Vishaka. But naturally, whenever we have a full moon, we always have Surya, the sun, opposing the moon. We always have the masculine, the sun, directly across from the moon, which is considered to be the divine mother and the divine feminine. So we always have these dualities at play. These tensions of the opposites are there. And if we look at the natural zodiac and what is the natural first house, that is Aries, which is where the sun is right now. And then Libra is the natural seventh house, or Bhava, which is where the moon is right now. And the seventh house in Vedic astrology is about relationships. Whenever we're looking at our own Vedic astrology chart, our seventh house is going to tell us how we are going to show up in a relationship, and also what our partner might be like, what our romantic endeavors and encounters might be like. So Libra is analogous in a way to the seventh house of relationships. And Libra as a sign, no matter where Libra is in your own Vedic astrology chart, because only someone who's an Aries ascendant is going to have Libra in their seventh house. But Libra in general is about our relationships and our conscious or unconscious agreements that we have with other people in our lives. So this is a really, really powerful time to start to examine your own relationships and what your conscious and unconscious agreements are. Something that I see a lot is that we make up assumptions about people. We assume things to be a certain kind of way, or we assume someone thinks about us in a certain kind of way. But there's a lot that's unspoken. There's a lot that's in these waters that are underneath the surface of how we come across in our relationships, which is interesting because that which is underneath the surface is more scorpionic. And of course, we know that in sidereal astrology, this moon is in Libra, but in Western astrology, it is happening in Scorpio. And Vishaka actually spans Libra and Scorpio. So we actually have this energy right now that is bridging us from Libra into Scorpio. Instead of assuming things about people, assuming what they think, or instead of having a extractive connection with someone where we're just thinking about what can I get, really taking time to take a step back and feel into how am I feeling in this relationship and connection? Where could I be self-abandoning? Where could I be falling into traps of people pleasing? This is something that's actually coming up in my personal sphere with both myself as well as people that I love and care about. which is people pleasing. And I'm personally taking a look at all of the ways that I have historically self-abandoned in relationships and not had strong boundaries due to my own anxiety and my own fears of love or connection going away, and how my boundaries have been weak, how I've placated to others, and seeing how that actually isn't really love, and instead trying to show up with a loving boundary, but also in my fullness. And this is something that I've been talking to several of my clients about, as well as several of my close friends, the ways that we self-sacrifice in order to have a relationship or connection. And the irony is that's not real love. When we are forgoing our boundaries and our standards, that comes at a pretty high cost, and it can actually end up being super damaging down the road. So taking a look at, like, if this is resonating with you, I'm sure there are people who are watching who don't do this, but anybody who has a tendency to people please, or has any tendencies towards codependency, or has an anxious attachment style like me, you would probably resonate with this on some level, and really seeing, like, okay, I'm doing these things, I'm making these sacrifices to have this connection, but I'm sacrificing myself ultimately. And if we are doing that, then there's inherently a lack of our own self-love, which is like Aries, it's that opposing energy. There's a lack of our own self-love, and then we really aren't showing up in our fullness in relationship either. So it's important to keep in mind that real love is first starting from within toward ourselves, so that we can show up with even more fullness in our romantic endeavors. And it's very interesting that Vishaka Nakshatra is so closely linked and likened to Radharani, who is the epitome of the divine feminine, the epitome of Bhakti, which really is that ultimate pinnacle of love, where it's beyond what serves you and what serves me, but it's like what is in service to love and to life itself. And this is where that single pointed focus that I was speaking about really comes in, is that deep devotion to this energy of love. And love as an energy is the energy of all creation and all existence. We come into the world with love, and we leave this world and we enter into a realm of love. And we have this energy of love available to us at all times. And the divine feminine really, on an ideal plane, feminine energy is about serving this energy of love, and is so fixated on that, is so entranced and enraptured by that. Just like the gopis, they are so enraptured by serving Lord Krishna, by being of deep service to the divine masculine, that they lose their sense of self, they lose their sense of ego, they lose their identity, and their whole identity becomes love. Same with the Sufi traditions. It's that whirling around and around and around, unraveling that which we are not, so that we can then focus on that true destination, which is the divine, which is love. And when I was younger, when I was like in my early 20s, I was so obsessed with this Sufi texture and the Sufi energy of everything being about love. And I was like really deep into study of Rumi and his work, and then I got really into Bhakti and the Krishna consciousness movement, because these spiritual traditions are really, really about devotion and love, and that's what's kind of going on right now in the sky. And there's something very important that we have to keep in mind, which is to reach that state of bliss, of Prema, that ultimate state, we can't get there falsely. We have to actually do the gritty inner work on ourselves and cleanse our own anartas, or our own inner impurities of our own heart. The parts of us that are greedy, the parts of us that are selfish, those parts that might people please, the parts that avoid, the parts that manipulate, the parts of us that are human, really. So that's why we always have Aries and Libra opposing each other in the sky. It's because there always needs to be a balance of how we're showing up for ourself, for our higher self, for our own dharma, for our own timeline, as well as how we're showing up for other and in relationship as well. So this is a really, really beautiful time to examine these two energetics of how we're showing up for ourselves and how we're showing up for other. And the more we can work on these truly more mundane planes and consciously contemplate this, then that's what actually over time creates space for us to show up with deeper devotion in our own relationships. Someone who has their moon in Vishaka, who's really got a lot of Vishaka energy, who had Vishaka energy, is Nelson Mandela. A very, very loving human being who had that single point of focus and who really showed up with deep devotion for a purpose higher than himself. And this is kind of like the higher expression of this energy of Libra and this Vishaka energy. It's relating to this more scorpionic quality of being able to show up and look at our own shadows and go underneath the surface of what we're doing and look at ourselves consciously. Die to the things that are no longer really in alignment with our dharma, with our truth, and with our highest timeline. And be born again into a more devotional and more spiritual realm. So definitely it's an important time. And we also have these shifts happening later on in the week. We have Jupiter, who is Guru, going into Gemini. And this is going to be a really good opportunity for us also to not just be discerning with our romantic relationships, our love life, our business relationships, but also be a little bit discerning about what we are devoted to in terms of our spiritual life, in terms of gurus, teachers, and guides. There are a lot of fakes out there. There are a lot of teachers and gurus out there who don't have the best intentions, who are power hungry, who are trying to manipulate on some level. And there are a lot of really good teachers out there. I've met and been blessed to know so many beautiful gurus, and I've come across a lot of the fake ones too. And one metaphor I've been using a lot is that if we're going to drink the Kool-Aid, we need to ask a couple questions first. Is this grape Kool-Aid made with high fructose corn syrup and additives, or is it made with butterfly pea powder and blue lotus and organic honey, locally cultivated honey, or maple syrup or something? Because there's a big difference between a Kool-Aid that's made with herbs and natural sweeteners versus high fructose corn syrup. And a lot of us in the collective, we are hungry. We are searching for meaning. We are searching for belonging. We are searching for something higher, a reason, something to belong to, because it's part of being human. It's part of our DNA to feel like we belong and to have meaning in our lives. But what I've seen too much is people who give up their own discernment and integrity for, say, a false guru, a false guide, or a false sense of belonging. And it's really important that we have discernment. If we are following someone as a guru, a spiritual teacher, asking the right questions. Or say there's a red flag. Say that there's something that isn't aligning. The actions of this person aren't aligning with the things that they're saying. Letting that red flag matter, not ignoring it, not having blind spots. And this really goes back to this energy of power that is so connected to Vishaka. What do we give our own power away to? And being discerning with that. Really making sure we're not giving our power away to gurus when it's not deserved, to lovers when it's not earned, to bosses, people we work with, anyone. Not really giving our power away. Being anchored in our own sense of mattering and importance, not in an egoic sense, but in a sense of like, hey, I am a spirit soul. I am a divine being, as everyone else is. A divine being incarnated on this planet, and I matter. And really letting that mattering, again, not from an egoic sense, not from a sense where we have to prove something, but a sense of worth. And if something feels like a red flag, if something isn't landing well, having the tough conversations. And also being willing to lose connection that isn't in the highest resonance. So for example, age-old story. You're following a guru, age-old story in spiritual communities. You're following a guru, you're giving it all away, you're in full devotion, but their actions don't align with their words. There's stuff going on underneath the surface that is really shady. Being willing to take a step back, being willing to re-examine that. Or you're in a relationship with someone and you're caught in people pleasing and you're doing whatever you can to try to placate this individual, but it's at sacrifice to yourself. So hopefully you can feel these energetics of self and other and how they're so interwoven. And again, this is a time for balance. The more we're in harmony with ourselves, with our heart, with our body, our feeling, the more then we can also show up in alignment with other. And if someone falls out of our life, but they fall out of our life when we are trying to be in our highest resonance, when we're trying to elevate, when we're stepping into our own power, they're not for us. They're not our teacher. They're not our person. And that's okay. Because ultimately, the most divine relationship we have is with ourselves and with Mother Earth and Father Sky. And so it is. I wish you a beautiful and blessed full moon.